Hello, Artful Journeys, 10 to 13-year-olds. How are you doing today? This is Mrs. Gerald. It is the Monday after Mother's Day, and our lesson today is going to be on Bridget Riley. You have a handout that I hope you've printed out, and we're going to have some fun with op art today. Before you make a judgment on op art, see what I have to say, and it might change your mind. Sometimes people look at op art and they either love it or they don't love it, but there's a lot of variation in op art. It doesn't have to be, anyway, let's talk about that in a minute. Okay, first of all, let's look at our Bible verse for today, which is, our help is in the name of the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. And just for a quick minute, this verse seems so simple, and you may think to yourself, oh, it's kind of the obvious, right? He's the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth, that's it. But pay attention to this first part. Our help is in the name of the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. And this reminds us who our help really comes from. If God spoke words that created the universe, galaxies, stars, planets, all life, all plant life, all human life, all animal life, all of nature and science. Wow, that's just mind-blowing to me. And if that's who made all of everything we see and even things we don't see, think about the power that God could just speak a word and a planet is formed. I mean, I'm speaking words right now, and there's no way I could form a planet, but God did. And so I hope you remember that when you need help for anything, what a powerful God we go to. The name of the Lord, just the name Jesus. If you're ever in trouble, sometimes when you're in trouble for something or accident happens and you can't even think what to pray in that moment, or maybe something really sad has happened and you just don't even know how to pray, all you have to say is the name. Just say the name Jesus. Sometimes that's all we can muster, but that is enough. You just say the name of the Lord. You just say Jesus. And the maker of heaven and earth is there to help you because he loves you so much. So just a good thought for today before we get started. And now let's talk about Bridget Riley. You've probably never heard of her before. Her name doesn't come up, but the style of artwork that she is very well known for is something you have seen, optical illusion, known as op art, the op art movement that started in the 1960s. Bridget Riley is alive today. She's 89. She was born in England, has lived in England most of her life, and she studied, get this, I found this so interesting. She really credits Claude Monet, Paul Cézanne, who we painted his pears this year, and we painted water lilies in the style of Claude Monet, and other artists that you may or may not know, George Seurat, Pete Mondrian, Matisse. She really liked their styles and even did some I don't want to call it copycat painting, but copying their work to get a sense of their style and how they used color and form. And yet, those artists that she really admired and was inspired by, her art doesn't look anything like them, does it? And yet she did study them and she learned from them. So I think that's a valuable lesson for us in that sometimes we make art completely different than what we see or that we're inspired by. And that's okay. We can still learn from art that is completely different from our own. So that's a good lesson. There's a fun fact here. This is really small and hard to see, but in reality, this painting is 7.5 feet wide by 7.5 feet tall. It is vertical stripes of white, I think red, blue, and black. Stripes that are kind of arresting on your eyes a little bit when you see them in real life. I just don't have room to put all the artwork that I want to on these sheets. But this painting sold at auction in 2008 for $5.1 million. Kind of mind-blowing, isn't it? Some of her artwork is still very sought after today. So I'm going to show you some larger versions of these. I'm going to turn the paper. Look at these. It's hard to see them on this little sheet. I mean, they're there, but it's fun to see them a little larger. These concentric circles, and yet the way she drew in those lines, really, where the lines meet, it almost seems like there's a little movement, right? Op art is the style of art that uses precise patterns and color to create optical illusions. Op artworks are abstract, with many better known pieces created only in black and white. Typically, op art gives the viewer the impression of movement or hidden images, or sometimes flashing and vibrating patterns, or of swelling and warping. You might see that here. This looks like, to me, it looks like hair, beautiful hair coming down in curls, but it could look like it's doing this, coming up and down a little bit, depending on what you see. Maybe it feels like some of these lines are moving a little bit in parts where they're squished up. It's interesting. Take a close look. How about this one? Does it look like it's moving or bending? How does it affect your vision as you look at it? Bridget Riley described her work as looking as if it were alive, kind of changing speed, moving faster and slower in some parts, expanding and contracting, right? Getting larger and then looking like it's getting smaller again, almost like a living thing. And this, to me, what do you see when you look at that? To me, this looks kind of like two walls that are curving and then moving away from me as some of these dots get small and more compressed looking. Let's see what else we've got here. This one looks so simple to us because we live in the year 2020. We live in a very visual society. We're used to seeing graphics all the time. But when Bridget Riley created her artwork, she wasn't using computers. People didn't have computers yet. Everything she did was drawn by hand. And you know, it took her sometimes 6 to 9 months to complete her whole process, from the initial idea of doing something like this to working out where the lines would go and the narrow parts and the wide parts and whether she was going to use color or black and white. And isn't that interesting to think that something so simple might have taken her 6 months to create a final version, right? Maybe she had lots of sketches beforehand. Look at this one. Oh, I just love this one. What do you see when you look at that? Just take a minute and really look at it. And when I look at it, I see that there are some lines, these ones that start with the little triangle right here at the top, the little one, seem to be straight lines that go straight all the way down the page, for instance. So here's the tiny white triangle, straight line, tiny white triangle, straight line, tiny white triangle at the top, straight line. But what about this one? Is this a straight line? No. So isn't that great how she's got straight lines interspersed with a curvy line in between, and then how she worked her diagonal lines to look at, to just create this sense of movement. And do you notice that the swells, I'm going to call them swells for lack of a better word, kind of happen at the top left and work their way down to the bottom right? I think that's so fun to look at. Can you see that very well? Remember, art is a lot about looking and observing. That's why I'm taking a couple minutes here at the beginning of our lesson to really look at something and learn from it. What I find so fascinating about this is you don't actually see a drawn line here, do you? It's just how the lines change direction that give us that look. Okay, so that's it for the Bridget Riley samples. Let's make some op art of our own today. We are going to use not straight lines, but curvy lines today. Just a reminder to have something under your paper as you're working. This is an old file folder that I have, and I have a piece of mat board underneath that, because my table is over here. And remember, Sharpies just bleed through. So whether you have an old folder or a stack of papers or something, just have something under your artwork and over your table, okay? So today what you're gonna need is a pencil. You'll need a pair of scissors, possibly. You'll need a fine tip Sharpie. If you've got the bigger Sharpie, you might want to consider working on a bigger piece of paper. If you're using a fine tip Sharpie, which I didn't give you because I wasn't planning all my lessons ahead at that point. I was kind of changing things for the rest of the year. So this is what we're going to do today. I used an ultra fine point Sharpie. So that's got this kind of a tip. But if you want to use a regular Sharpie, just think about using a bigger piece of paper. Here, this is the sulfite paper in your packet that I gave you. It's 9 inches by 12 inches, and I cut one in half to create this smaller piece of artwork. Okay? I don't know about you, but I am just in love with this. I think I've had so much fun creating these. So I'll leave it up to you based on what kind of pen you've got. If you've got a fine pen, you could use a bigger piece of paper. It's just going to take a lot longer to fill up that paper with a fine tip pen. But it would look really wonderful too. But when I give you that information ahead of time, if you use a large Sharpie like this, on this one, you might not get some of the fine detail because your pen is just going to be thicker. So you can experiment on a piece of scratch paper. You've got lots of extra of this paper in your packet, and you can just experiment with your pens and see what you come up with. All right, here's one I did in pencil as a test. You might want to just use pencil. That's fine too. Okay, so let's get started. I think I'm going to work on the large piece of paper just so you can see it a little better with the camera where it is. And again, I'll just leave it up to you what kind of pen you want to use. So the scissors are for if you want to cut your paper in half. Okay, so here is my paper. The idea of this is I'm going to make some dots, and so wherever all my lines come together are my dots. I'm mostly going to go for dots in triangular shapes, but you can wing it as you go too. Just practice and see what takes shape for you. But here's how I start. So I'm going to take just very lightly with a pencil. The pencil dots are going to give me something to work towards when I use my pen. So I'm going to just make some dots here. Say there's a triangle, right? I've got 3 dots. I'm going to maybe add another dot here and one here, and you can see I'd make another triangle here and another triangle here, and let's see, I'll do one there just to get started, and then I can build from there. So now I'm going to take my pen, and the reason I'm using Sharpie is I'm going to come back and add a little color at the end with some watercolor. If you are not going to add water to yours at the end, you don't have to use a Sharpie. You could use any marker or pen, whatever you like. You might want to use colored pencils at the end and color some parts in. So totally up to you. I'm going to leave this here so that you can see it. This is a little different technique, but what I'm showing you here is the coloring technique there. Okay, so I'm going to take my pen and I'm actually going to test it, because some of my Sharpies are better than others. That one's okay. All right, so to start, I'm going to connect my dots just like that. And I might do a whole triangle. And this is where it's up to you, whatever works well for you. So I'm making a triangle, and now I'm going to add some curvy lines. I'm going to kind of work from my center line outward and make a couple of curvy lines, keeping my lines fairly close together, but as they come back to the point, my lines are going to overlap. It's just inevitable. But that's what ends up giving you this pretty space where it's got the illusion of almost like flower petals being drawn in. So I'm going to try this one then. What I tend to do is work in sections. I'll do another one here, and I feel like I need to switch pens. Like this pen is getting a little dry. Okay, there's some basic without causing any squishing or problems. Let's try this pen. So now I've got this space in here, and I certainly have space out here. This is where you get to decide, how are you going to handle this space? I'm bringing my line up to fill that a little more. So it doesn't have to be a perfect almond shape. And you might want to do something like this, where you fill that in like that. That's just one option. So now I'm going to connect to another line. But this one I'm going to add some curves over here on this end. And I'm going to leave my line overlapped a little more before I start branching out and creating a space. I want to give an illusion of this different kind of movement here. And I might do it here and go like that. And then my lines overlap a little bit on this end a little more, and I've got a little more space right here coming down to overlap. So you don't have to do the same shape all the time. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. I'm going to draw a curvy line here. Notice I did a curvy line. That's fine. So just keeping my lines kind of close together, taking my time, doing a good job. This is the point of the artwork where you might want to put on some music and just enjoy what you're doing. Now, I could take any one of these. I think I'm going to build this one up a little bit. So you're basically building shapes. Like that. They could be large shapes, small shapes. You could even do something like this, where you make a teardrop shape. Maybe you've got something like that. And then maybe you connect to here. So really, it's up to you how you build these shapes. I'm going to do this guy here. So you see, I'm just connecting dots and edges, and then building with my lines. I might want to pull this one out a little bit here. So it looks like this is over and this is under. I'm going to come back and add another line here. So you can see how this might take a little while to build into something like this. If you want to take a look at this one, you can look to see where my triangles were. For instance, you can see a triangle here, and then I had a triangle here, right? And a triangle here. But look at this one, how that went. That one was different than the petals, like these three petals. And this one was really long. I could have put a dot here and made a triangle here, here and there, but I wanted to do something a little different. So you can see how the shapes can be whatever you want them to be, but in the end, you've got this illusion, just by using black lines on a white page, you've got this illusion of height, of things kind of spreading out and then pinching in, as if you're holding a bundle of flower petals and then they're coming out. All right, so does that make sense? Should I do a few more on here? Let's see, I think I will do a few more. How would you fix, let's say you did something like this. What would you do next? Well, what I tend to do is find a point. This seems to be a point here. And here I'm making, what if I wanted to make a triangle out here? So I'll put my line there. Oh, I think I finally found the Sharpie in my pile of Sharpies. I have a whole pile of Sharpies. I've got Sharpies everywhere, I tell you. But you can never have enough Sharpies. I have come to realize that. I think I even have a Sharpie in one of my sweatshirt pockets. Okay, I'm gonna make this one big right here. I know I have a Sharpie in my sweatshirt pocket. I have a Sharpie in my car. I usually have a Sharpie in my purse, right in there with the extra Band-Aids, because I'm telling you what, every once in a while, I just need a Sharpie. Or someone else needs a Sharpie, and I say, well, yes, hold on a second, I've got one right here. Isn't that funny? Okay, so let's see here. I'm gonna pull this out and just do that. And I'm gonna make this guy be the one. You can make it arch up small to fit in like this. Or it could be something where you're making it as if it was part of another shape completely back there. Totally up to you. Again, there's not a lot you could do wrong here. As long as you're going from a point and connecting another point and then doing lines, creating lines that just come out and out a little further. Oh, I think I'm losing this Sharpie. It's starting to go dry. It's the end of the school year, and my Sharpies have been used up a little bit. I'm gonna do this guy a little more. That guy too. You might even want to do something like this, as if there is something even completely different. A whole other shape under there. Your call on how you want to do this. One thing I would say, just to take your time. When you start going faster, you do make a few more mistakes. So if you take your time and just enjoy the process. I think that's what I enjoy most, is just the doing of it. It's really fun to have a nice looking product at the end, to have something that you really like, that you would want to put up in your room or on the bulletin board in the kitchen or give to someone. This would be fun as a note card. If you were to fold this in half and then create a design just on one half and color that in and give it as a note card to someone, that would be so cool. I think any pen pal or grandparent that you sent that to would really enjoy that. So you'll see I'm starting, I'll work on a new section, and then I might not finish it. I'll go work on another section for a minute and then come back to this one as the whole thing just kind of takes shape. And I just kind of see how it goes. I kind of have a loose plan, but then I let my plan take shape. So you'll see here I'm kind of tracing my line over and then creating space there. So I bet whatever you're working on is looking really fun. There we go. And I might do this. All right. So you can see how that will take a while to fill a space. And again, you can use a big Sharpie. You can still use half a piece of paper, but you'll get a different look with different pens or pencils. Your choice, but I don't know, I could just look at these for hours, you guys. I think these are so fun. Okay, so now let's talk about what you would do if you wanted to add some color. I've got my colored pencils here. You could use regular colored pencils. You could use watercolor pencils if you have some. Not everyone has those, but if you are in a household where you have different art supplies, give it a try. You could use anything we've used this year. You could try soft pastels or crayons even. I'm going to use a little bit of watercolor to color this in. I've got my water ready here. And I just love these colors. Talia made this, by the way. This was something different she was working on a couple weeks ago. And you've got that idea of something behind something else. So there's a little bit of an illusion of space. So I thought it would be fun to do something similar. I'm using the same kind of brush that would come in your packet of paints if you had this. If you have different brushes at home, bigger brushes, by all means, use whatever kind of brush works well for you. Different size brushes will work well for different things, but I've got some smaller spaces, so I'm gonna just use what I've got here. Remember, sometimes you wanna put a drop of water on your paints to activate them. If you're using watercolor, just kind of get them ready there. But I'm gonna re-wet some of the watercolor I've got here and add some color there. I'm also gonna add a little bit of a darker, more saturated bit of color right here on the ends. And do that. See how that looks. Just like that. You can play around with if you'd want to use analogous colors or not. Rainbow colors. Maybe you want to do this all in a soothing blues and aquas, or maybe you want warm colors. Maybe you want to use the wet and wet technique and have a couple colors in one pod area, or just do them all individually. Maybe you want your colors to bleed. Like I'm going to take that green and I'm going to put that green in here and then blend to something different over here. They don't all have to be a separate color. Pull some color here. I think I'm going to pull some yellow in there now. So have fun with it. Again, you can leave it black and white, or you could add color, your choice. Going back to Bridget Riley for a minute, you know, she's very well known for her black and white. Those are some of her most sought after artworks today by collectors, people who have a lot of money, obviously. Of course, the painting is not this big, but it is 7.5 feet tall by 7.5 feet wide, but $5.1 million. Wow, that's crazy. So she does work in color as well. I didn't put as many of her color works on. You have to look kind of closely to see these. This one was created in 1993. This one was created 10 years later in 2003. So she's got some soft lines here. This is all very geometric, hard lines, different, but still kind of that Bridget Riley look. There's not as much three-dimensional, no three-dimensional look here in this one at all. Maybe a little bit here depending on how you look at it. So again, just fun to look at. But all to say, Bridget Riley used color. Maybe you want to use color in her style, or maybe you want to create your own style. So I think one of the things that's fun about looking at other artists for inspiration, you can take as much of their style and use that as a springboard, or maybe you just want to take a look at their style and use one little bit, one little thing from their style to create something else that you do. So that's just so fun. Okay, well, I hope I've given you a little bit of inspiration. I hope you've learned a little something today about op art that maybe you didn't know before. And I hope you have fun doing something that you enjoy and that you like, and create something. And while you're at it, why don't you create one to give to a friend or a grandparent or a parent, because you do wonderful work. So now next week we are going to meet on Zoom at 9 o'clock just for kind of a quick hello. I don't imagine it'll take more than a half an hour. I'm going to let you guys have a chance to say hi to each other, maybe catch up for a few minutes and see how you're all doing. And if you've got some artwork that you've been creating at home, whether it is artwork from our lessons on videos, or maybe something you've created completely separate from what we've done and something on your own, I would love to see it. If you want to share it with the class and show off some of your artwork, I think that would be wonderful, because all of you do such marvelous work. And just a reminder, you shouldn't be comparing your artwork to anyone else's or mine, but just do what you enjoy. And then the joy that you have when you create your artwork really comes through. And I love seeing what you do. So I would love to see that next week. But if you want to come to the Zoom and you don't want to share artwork, that's okay too. We would just love to see you and be able to say hello and then say goodbye for the summer. Okay, so next week at 9 o'clock, we'll meet on Zoom. I do have a lesson for next week. I'm not sure yet if I'll probably do it as a YouTube video separately, but still also maybe show it to you during our Zoom class. Not sure yet, but it's more of a fun hello summer kind of a project. Okay, well, I hope you have enjoyed this. I would love to see what you come up with, I don't know, the possibilities are endless. Or of course this one was very fun, these parallel overlapping lines. So whatever you come up with, I'd love to see it. Hope you have a great week. I miss seeing you in person, but I hope you're enjoying this spring weather, and I'll see you next week, okay? Bye-bye.